We already knew the opponents. Now we've got the official schedule for the 2023 season. 5 primetime games, 1 Thursday night matchup at Philly, 2 Monday night games, both at home versus San Francisco and Chicago, 2 Sunday night games at Denver and at home versus Green Bay. Another observation, the Broncos game in Mile High, November 19th. We'll see what the weather's like then. But outside of that, no cold games for Minnesota. You get your travels to Lambeau Field and Chicago within the first 8 games. You also have games on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, so drinking during those evenings will be for either joy or for rage. Happy holidays in advance, by the way. But now that the schedule is out, the major waves of free agency is done. So is the draft. I think it's time to do a game-by-game record prediction, damn it. Week 1 versus Tampa. Minnesota opens the year versus what's expected to be one of the worst teams in the league. Either Kyle Trask or Baker Mayfield will be the quarterback. Vikings get off to a 1-0 start. Week 2 at Philadelphia, Thursday night football. The reigning NFC champions. They lost Javon Hargrave, but they reloaded their defensive line through the draft with Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. The interior offensive line for the Vikings will struggle. Kirk Cousins will take some licks. Meanwhile, on the opposite side, not having a complete defensive line translates to Jalen Hurts doing whatever the hell he wants. Vikings take the L here. Week 3 versus the Chargers. This is going to be a shootout. 2 of the top 10 offenses last year face off. Might come down to who has the ball last. Because it's at home, US Bank Stadium, I'm going to say the Vikings narrowly squeeze out a victory here. Week 4 at Carolina. You're facing a rookie quarterback with subpar weapons. Brian Flores is going to go blitz crazy. You better win this game. Minnesota, they go 3-1. Vikings versus the Chiefs. A defense trying to find its way versus the best quarterback in the league coming off his second Super Bowl win. That's going to be a loss. Week 6 at Chicago. All the Justin Fields hype can kiss the blackest part of my ass. I don't believe in this guy at all as a passer. Kirk Cousins will put up numbers with Jefferson and Addison that Fields will not be able to keep up with even with Moore and Moody. Give me the Vikings in this one. Week 7 versus the San Francisco 49ers. A top 2 team in the conference. Doesn't matter who their quarterback is. They're going to bring the heat defensively. And I think we're going to struggle against the run baseline. So Christian McCaffrey, he's going to have a field day on the ground, chewing up clock. Vikings, they fall to 4-3. At Lambeau Field. I think the Vikings will split the series against the Packers. I'll give this one to Jordan Love in Green Bay. It's early in the season. He's going to be comfortable at home. Vikings, they'll win the second time around. Week 9 at Atlanta. Is Desmond Ridder the real deal? Don't know yet. What I do know is there's at least one game every year where you get dropped and you say, what the hell just happened? They have a plethora of playmakers, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. I think this is going to be the WTF game for the Vikings. They fall to 4-5. Week 10 versus New Orleans. I don't think Derek Carr getting a change of scenery is really going to make a difference. In fact, I would argue last year should have been a peak for him with Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams as his weapons, Josh McDaniels calling the plays, and still just 3,500 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, 14 interceptions last year. Now he goes to New Orleans with a defensive head coach, and this is where he finally takes off? No. Kirk will outperform Derek Carr. Marcus Davenport, he gets his revenge. Vikings, they get the win. Vikings at Denver. I have a hard time believing Russell Wilson will be awful year 2 with the Broncos. And if there's anyone that can get him back to his Seattle form, besides Pete Carroll, of course, it's Sean Payton. Tough environment, prime time, the incomplete chant by the crowd. I think the Vikings are going to lose this one. They fall to 5-6. Chicago, again, I got the Vikings sweeping this series. They're at 6-6 at the Raiders. Jimmy Garoppolo without an elite defense, so you're asking for him to make up for the difference. That's a recipe for disaster. Vikings offense will run circles around Vegas. Minnesota wins this game by at least 2 scores. At Cincinnati, Joe Burrow after Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the league, and with a defense that's going to probably be below average. Likely another forgettable performance. You're going to need a miracle like the Buffalo game last year. I don't think you can count on that again. They're going to lose to the Bengals. Detroit, Even though they went about their draft in a goofy way, I am finally a believer that they are now on the come up. Jameson Williams, he'll be playing after that bogus suspension. Dan Campbell, he coaches them boys up hard. I think the Vikings will split the series with the Lions. Packers, after losing earlier to Jordan Love in the season, I think the Vikings make up for it in primetime week 17. And again, the Vikings, they're going to split the series with the Lions. So with that, I've got Minnesota going 9-8. The wild ride of 2022 comes back to reality. Maybe it's enough to get to the playoffs, maybe not. We'll see. Comments time. First one is by Garrett Kielberg. So Rodgers is gone. Kirk is the best quarterback in the NFC North, and you want Kirk gone. LOL. Your Kirk Cousins comparison is weak. How many decades did it take Kansas City to land a quarterback? LOL. Kirk leaves or ship sinks ASAP. Super Bowl or bust? LOL. A lot of LOLs there. We could be in the playoffs every year with Kirk. Okay. I have so many problems with this comment. Really, two. But let's start at the top, shall we? Aaron Rodgers is gone. So that means Kirk Cousins is the best quarterback in the NFC North and you want him gone. LOL. No disrespect, Garrett, but when talking about the Vikings, I'm trying to figure out how can they be one of the best teams in this conference. And we're sitting here shaking our asses for the NFC North. Are we going to hang a banner for that? Secondly, ironically enough, you brought up Kansas City. How many decades did it take for them before they got their quarterback? Well, if they had done what you're suggesting, Garrett, settling with Alex Smith as their quarterback, well, we're getting to the playoffs every year. What's there to talk about? What's there to bitch and moan about? They wouldn't have traded up for Patrick Mahomes while Alex Smith was still on the roster. There's plenty of content creators that will celebrate participation trophies. I'm not one of them. No disrespect. Next comment is by Derek Shepard. Been a Vikings fan since 98, been through a lot. We need a fresh start and build around our key players. Find a way to get first pick in 2024. It will tell us how much the franchise wants to compete and win. I think year 3 is going to be the signature move by Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah in the draft. I think that every general manager, they have that one move that they make to where it really helps the franchise, or conversely enough, hurts the franchise in the long run. I think for Rick Spielman, off the top of my head, maybe I'm missing something here, but just recency bias, trading Stephon Diggs and turning that into Justin Jefferson and others, that was huge. I would say that was his signature move. The Vikings, they are going after a quarterback in next year's draft in the first round, and they will trade up. And maybe it's not Caleb Williams, maybe it's Drake May, but they're going to make a move for a quarterback, and I can't wait for it. And lastly, Harm's Way says, I believe Kwesi would have tried to go for the number 1 pick if the Texans had it instead of the Bears. No way in hell Chicago would have given the first pick to a division rival, but judging by the other teams in the NFC, it's most likely the Vikings will be in the 20s again for the next draft, so they'd have to give up a lot of picks and maybe even a player or two if they want to trade up for a spot to be in position for Williams or any other top quarterback prospect. I agree with the first half of your comment, Harm's Way, in the sense that if the Bears didn't have the first overall pick, maybe the Vikings would have made a move like Carolina did to get that pick. So instead of, after all those first round picks that you give up to trade up to number 1, instead of DJ Moore like Carolina gave up, the Vikings likely would have given up Danielle Hunter. The second part of your comment saying that, well, they're probably looking at being in the 20s again for next year's draft. If my record prediction turns out to be true and they're 9-8, instead of, they went 13-4 last year and ended up picking 23. 9-8, I think they're looking at the teens, maybe even the early teens.